Welcome to the Build on Beauty podcast, where beauty is born skin deep. Now, here's your host, author, speaker, entrepreneur, Cornell Jermaine.
Hey, Cornell Jermaine here. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Build on Beauty podcast. Listen, as we are continuing in this Women's History Month, we're celebrating women across the globe who are doing remarkable things in their respective industries and professions. And I had to bring this conversation that I had with a woman who has blazed the trail for me professionally. She is a leading authority on inner and outer beauty, a sought-after empowerment speaker, executive coach, the former beauty and cover director for Essence magazine, and she's now the editor at large for the publication. Listen, she's an author. She has working on films, and she'll talk a little bit about that. Listen, there's so much she's doing and has done for us in the culture of beauty and fashion and beyond. And I had to bring this conversation to you. Listen, welcome to the platform, the editor-in-chief, a force of beauty, the essence of beauty personified. I bring you the one and only Miss Mikki Taylor. Miss Mikki Taylor. Miss Mikki, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine and honored to sit with you tonight.
Yes, I am honored to have you. I want to discuss your work at Essence, how you ended up there. But first, we have to, and I've been doing this with all my guests, I have to just see, how have you been doing with the pandemic and all that's going on?
Oh my gosh. You know, I have to tell you, the pandemic was actually not only a crisis, but it became a blessing in disguise. You know, it was like that one day on the calendar that you had, one day I'm going to do this, one day I'm going to do that. So the crisis became my one day. And so I've done all of the things that I've wanted to do. And interestingly enough, I have not lacked for social engagement, if you will, nor the work. But it's just freed up my time, getting the things that I talk to women about all the time, getting enough sleep, those pursuits that bring you joy. I started a garden this year, and I have not only had the healthiest foods from it for a plant-based diet, but also the abundance of flowers. So that saves me a lot on my flower bill too. But having that precious commodity too, known as time for self. So yeah, it has blessed me in many ways, from connections to pursuits, passions, the writing, all of that.
Yes. Has it interrupted any of the flow at the publication at all?
Now everybody's working remotely. So, that was an adjustment period for them. For me, it wasn't, because I always work remotely. I usually speak for the publication at live events like the Essence Festival, Disney Dreamers Academy with Steve Harvey, which we're getting ready for as a virtual experience. So for me, it wasn't difficult because I'm usually on a plane every week and working from home. So yeah, but for them, it was a bit of a challenge.
Yes. Well, speaking of the publication Essence, you have spent many years there. One as the editor, beauty and cover director for 30 years, now the editor at large. Discuss how, because you didn't start off there. Discuss your start and how you even got exposed to the magazine itself.
Well, I cherish the day that my mother first brought Essence home when I was still in my school days. And my mother she was hairstylist and makeup artist to the late American icon that was Sarah Vaughan. So my mother traveled the world with SAS and would bring home magazines from every port of call. But certainly we weren't in those magazines, not from Paris, not from London, not anywhere. And so the day she brought home Essence, it was a standout because it was beyond beholding myself in the mirror. It was just looking at Black beauty in all of its glory. And so certainly years later, when I started to model, my dream was to be on the pages of Essence magazine. And I remember going for a go-see and Susan Taylor using me repeatedly from that point on, because she said the agencies didn't have models who looked like me, chocolate brown, full nose, all of that. And so, that was a real source of pride, if you will. Never did I dream that I would become an editor, But so after modeling, I started a career on 7th Avenue with a then little known firm by the name of Tahari Limited, and doing merchandising and fabrications, working with production and all of that. And the Essence team used to come to Tahari to borrow clothes for the shoots. And so when there was an opening in 1980 in the fashion and beauty department, I was hired for that first role. Oddly enough, that first role was kind of mirrored where we are right now, in that Black women were going to work and not getting the salaries of their Caucasian counterparts. So what did we do? We sewed our clothes. So my experience from 7th Avenue tied right into having fashions created that we could sew for the fashion and beauty pages. 1 year later, after poking my head into beauty, Susan became editor-in-chief, and she appointed me as beauty editor, and I eventually became beauty and cover director. And so it is just a joy to get up every day, still here 40 plus years later, and go to work for Black women.
Yes, absolutely. Now, you threw out there that you eventually became a beauty and cover director, but that's a lane that you defined for yourself, if I'm not correct. How did you get the courage to go to the powers that be and say, hey, you need this office and I'm the one that has to fill it?
Well, I came of age with an edict that said, if the best is possible, then good is not enough. And so if you see better, if you see best, it rests with you to go for it and to execute it. And so I came up with an idea to really give the Essence cover synergy, because in looking at the newsstand at that time, there were so many titles aimed at women in what we call the general market, every color but us. And Essence was the only magazine talking to us about every aspect of our lives. Many times at the checkout or at newsstands, the logo would be covered up. And I wanted Black women to know that this was their magazine no matter what. So if the logo was covered up, they would still recognize, oh, that's Essence right there. So I wanted to give the cover that synergy. I laid it out. I pitched for the position. And I remember being asked, well, what about the art director? How will he feel? I said, oh, we're going to make a great team, and he's going to look really good. And so this was long before branding was being talked about as a terminology, but it was important to me that the magazine be cohesive, that it certainly spoke to the broad spectrum of Black women, all shades, shapes, and sizes, which was the magazine's genesis, and that it spoke to us from all corridors of life. And so, in fact, Essence was one of the first magazines to put celebrities on the cover, but also one of the first magazines to put a gang girl on the cover who talked about her experience, because this is life. To talk about, this is the face of AIDS, and we put a beauty from Chicago on the cover. And so we always said that Essence magazine, we put this magazine out for and about ourselves. And so when that's the starting point, it's not work at all. It's not work at all. 6 years into my work at Essence, I pitched for the position of cover editor and became beauty and cover director.
Wow, amazing. I'm curious, what's been your most memorable cover under that position?
Oh my gosh. That's like the desert island beauty product. They say if you were going to be stuck on a desert island, what would be your must-have product? And I always say I wouldn't go, because I couldn't have just, I would have to pack to be stranded on a desert island. You heard that first. So but oh gosh, there's so many. I can't say one. I've done at least 7 covers with Mary J. Blige. A joy to work with every time. Such a chameleon. The same with Oprah. Every time I worked with Oprah, I went in search of a different woman, a different casting, a different possibility. It was certainly epic to shoot the first family portrait of the Obamas. And that became our September 2008 cover, and to work with them, to work in the White House with Mrs. Obama and her mother for a cover. It's an endless list of our history, really, because I have worked with everyone from Rosa Parks to including Oprah and Michelle Obama. So it's been quite a journey, and captured on the cover, captured in a lot of, we did a lot of videography, which is what led me to create my own film company, because, behind the scenes, I would always do those behind the scenes shoots or film shorts with cover subjects like Will and Jada, certainly Oprah, different ones. And so it just is another platform for me to tell our truth.
Wow, speaking of the covers, on the July-August cover of, I think Billy Porter is the featured artist on there. Under the title of Essence, there's a little line that says, Black Stories Matter. And in this climate of Black Lives Matter, all the stuff that's going on, from your vantage point, why are Black stories so important right now?
Well, it's because our narrative has been mishandled and has been told in total error up until this point. And so now it is on us to tell the truth. It's on us to give this gift to our children, to give this gift to the future. We, in essence, are the griots of our times. So yes, Black stories matter. Yes, the story of even how we came to America, how we succeeded, where we go from here, what we're still up against, how our beauty is perceived, the roadblocks that the ancestors and the elders had to overcome for us to be able to blaze trails today. Yeah, if we don't tell it, who will? And yes, they are critical right now.
Yes, absolutely. I can't help but to ask about, there have been two publications that I know of who featured, unfortunately, the young lady who lost her life to police violence, and that's Breonna Taylor. And kudos to those publications. Is there a risk when a publication steps out to lend their voice to such a sensitive topic? Is there a risk that they take to do that?
I think you have to calculate what you define as risk. My mother taught me to be risk adverse is to be success adverse. And I think that, we can't see these times through rose-tinted glasses. If media has a responsibility, its responsibility is first and foremost to tell the truth, to mirror the times, to share the things that will unify us and talk about the things that are separating us. I think that is, at the very least, journalism. Mm-hmm. So yeah, risk be darned. I think that any publication worth their grain of salt has to step across that line.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you were the former beauty and cover director for 30 years, now the editor-at-large for the magazine, but you are also an entrepreneur, author, speaker, and we want to talk about your latest book, Editor-in-Chic, How to Be Styled and Your Most Empowered Self. I've got to ask, how did you get into, I guess, what prompted this idea to want to become an author? Because this is your third publication, correct?
I only write books when I have something to say, because books for me are a conversation. And I was traveling the country and I found that there was far too much survival talk among us. And we weren't created to survive. We were created to thrive. And so I wanted to enter the conversation and change the tone. So I wrote Editor-in-Chic, specifically for that reason. And it has three tenets. One, to help us own our lives. Two, to celebrate our beauty. And three, to master our purpose with distinction. And it really talks about what that blazing those trails looks like. And it's not only my voice, it's the voice of experts around the world. It's sisters who have lived, as I say, women like Jill Scott and Marjorie Harvey and Lisa Nichols and Yolanda Adams and Iyanla Van Zandt and so many more, because I don't like untested advice. And so I wanted to certainly write a book that wasn't a reality show in its nature, but here was a book that you could check in with every day and get a piece of information to help you move your life forward. So yeah, that's why I wrote it. And it really talks about those things that I know are critical. First, the inner peace, if you look at what it means, what self-perception means in this day and age, if you look at the importance of having a celebration circle, that's a team of celebrants who push, polish, check, support you. You know, I always say your greatness was not designed to operate in isolation. So who's in the circle to keep lifting you higher, to remind you of the truth of who you are? And then, of course, yes, it deals with the outer beauty. It deals with makeup and the hair, and not only from self-care perspectives, but you know, from the truth. Like I learned that over 27 million of us were losing our hair to some form of alopecia. And that said to me that stress is processing us as opposed to us processing it. It talks to you about, you know, wardrobe, because, you know, I really believe that getting dressed for your body type should be one of your greatest pleasures. And so I wanted to demystify what great style is. And so, yeah, it talks about all of that. And then certainly mastering the empire that is you, Inc. And what will be your legacy? What are the fruits along the journey? How does the purpose that lies in you, how does that bless others? Because it wasn't given to you just for your sole purpose. So yeah, so it talks about all of that. It's what I call the kitchen table talk. And you know, whenever you sit at the kitchen table to talk, it's going to be some serious stuff, but it's going to be good for you.
Yes. You've said so much. I got to unpack some of that. You talk about the celebration circle. We understand that those are people who are going to not only celebrate your wins, but they're going to help you get there. How does one even define who should be in that circle?
Well, you know, it's like anything else of value. You have to curate it. It doesn't happen all at once. You don't decorate your home all at once. You know, you don't fix you have ingredients that go into a meal that make it what it is. A celebration circle is curated, and it's curated over time. It's curated by people who have strong values, people who have been maybe where you're going, who could tour you on the path of where you're headed, who won't come to your pity parties, but pull you out of them, who'll Samaritan you when you've fallen and help you make that comeback greater than when you started. They'll remind you of the truth of who you are and keep you on purpose, because you don't have time for delays. You don't have time for distractions. You don't have time to lose your focus. So, you know, it's essential to have a celebration circle. I call them a team of celebrants, and, you know, no one should be without one.
Yeah, so important. It's funny because you always say you don't believe adult women or adults, period, should have a wish list. They should have a checklist. Explain that concept.
Yes. So, you know, wish lists are for children. You know, when you grew up, you wish for this and that for your birthday. You wish for this and that for Christmas or what have you. But when you become an adult, that's the time to own your life. And it's about a checklist. It's, for example, even when I started my garden at the top of COVID at the end of March, I said, you know, I went from idea to I did it. That's a checklist. And so that's how it is. Whatever is important to you must be realized. And you want to go from idea to I did it. You know, when we are adults and we daydream, that's really a form of hallucination. And we don't have time to hallucinate. Yeah.
That's heavy. That's heavy, Miss Mikki.
You can't allow it. You have to hold yourself accountable. What are you doing every day so that what you desire shows up in your life? And you have to count it important. And that means that you have to set boundaries. You even have to learn how to lovingly say no to others and some things so that it doesn't prohibit you from making progress. Yeah. Because that calendar, you know, in reality, aside from the joke of COVID, that calendar with someday or one day never comes if you don't accelerate your pace to get to it.
So good. You talk about the celebration circle, but let's talk about what you call the inner coach. Because you said if your inner coach is not affirming, and this is for women, how fierce you are, fire her. Talk about that inner coach and how one even develops that skill set.
Yeah. So again, every day that you rise, you have a choice to make withdrawals or deposits with self. You can't even teach other people how to honor you if you don't honor yourself. And it begins with that inner critic. And, you have to look at what is playing out in your mind. And if it doesn't hold up against the truth, it has to be dismissed. So that means she has to be fired, because you wouldn't make provision in your life for anyone else that brought you that bad behavior, that told you what you weren't, who always cast doubt in your way, who said she had her doubts about you or didn't believe you could show up or told you you weren't this and you weren't that. So why would you make provision within? So yeah, you have to fire her. You got to dismiss her. You can't use her. She makes withdrawals.
Now, if once you fire her, is there something you can replace her with in order to have that self-confidence you need?
Absolutely. Even if you have to make yourself a list of wordles that remind you that you're determined, that you are fierce, that you are on purpose, that you are doing this by divine order, that you are unprecedented, that when God created you, he only created one and he was satisfied. So it doesn't get any more beautiful than that. It doesn't lie in the lipstick. It lies in the lips that the lipstick will grace. You really have to have that powerful conversation before you step out into the world, because the world will have another conversation if you let it.
We were talking about the checklist. Now, I know there are many women, and this is catered to women, but of course, all of us can learn from it. But many women have a checklist that is a little longer now with COVID. The kids are being homeschooled. They need to buy computers. We got to buy this device. How does one, because you talk about defining or finding your own lane in Editor-in-Chief, how does a woman define her own lane when her complete checklist is about the kids, the spouse, career, keeping the house in order? How does she step away to even find herself?
So, as I said at the top, I don't believe in untested advice. So I'm a mother of 3. I've been married. I just celebrated my 38th wedding anniversary. Thank you. I have always been a brand within the brand. So I've always been brand Mikki within Essence. So entrepreneurship, if you will, pushing this brand forward is not foreign to me. And so my youngest 2 children are 17 months apart. So one would think that time for self would evaporate the moment they were born. Not so. So, you get 24/7. How are you going to use them? How are you going to manage your energies? For me, that meant rising an hour ahead of my family to have time for self, because I treasure my vision space. What goes on in here, I need silence to nurture that. And so you want to nurture what you need to grow and starve what you need to check. So that means you got to rise up ahead of your family. You got to understand the many roles that you play and how much energy you can give to each one. So on any given day, when my children were small, they needed to go to school. I could be heading to the airport. I could be heading to a shoot, or certainly maybe heading to the office. So again, and how are you delegating? How are you setting boundaries? How are you training up the children in the way that they should go, that the Bible talks about? My husband and I dated every weekend when the children were little, because love life is what brought them here. So again, you have to that's again part of owning your life. It's how you structure what matters. And it's important for you to thrive. As a woman, it all revolves around you.
Absolutely.
You're a mother and a wife, and you're trying to homeschool and manage all of this. It all falls apart if you don't have it together.
So true. So true. I've got to pivot because you're an expert in beauty and fashion. And many of our industry professionals are dealing with a situation they've never planned for. Some are back to work, others are not. From your vantage point, how can the professionals now, I guess, pivot in order to save the industry, first of all, and then, maintain their lifestyle?
So again, it's about your connections. Relationships are your wealth. So if you look at what Harlem Fashion Row just did with Icon 360 and how they have created this grant for designers. If you look at the number of organizations that are pouring into designers, particularly African-American designers. So it's not about panicking, it's about pivoting. And where can you get that support? How clear is your business plan, your mission statement? Who do you serve? What are your dreams like? That where a sponsor will say, yeah, I definitely want to buy into this, because you can't succeed at what you won't expose. No, this is the time to be most creative. One of the things that I say about these times is that they are pregnant with opportunity. And if you labor right, you're going to give birth to some amazing successes. Even if you look at the things that have happened to us in this year alone, if you look at what's happening with Black Lives Matter, if you look at the many martyrs who have given their life for us to get justice, and we're still fighting for it. So there are people who are paying repentance, if you will, if I could just be frank, who are willing to say, okay, this is not right. I can't change the nation, but how can I help a small part of it? What industry can I help? And so fashion is now being pulled forward as a result of exposure, good, bad, and very ugly. Yeah.
Wow, so true. I've got to talk about some of your ventures. You have the book, but you also are an entrepreneur yourself, and you have other ventures that you do. Talk about some of the work that you do outside of Essence and being an author.
So certainly I have been a member of the Screen Actors Guild, I guess about 10 years, if you will. And it's just been really important for me to have a vote. I've been a voting member, to have a vote and a voice in how our stories are told, who gets recognized, if you will. And so I have been supporting the arts during this length of time, and certainly doing the work of an executive producer and director to a degree. So it made me say, okay, there are unexpected stories about women of color that still need to be told. And so I started my own film company last year, Satin Doll Films. It's a division of my company, Satin Doll Productions. And so I'm working with a director now, and we have several pitches, out there on the table, and one that's being packaged right now. And I'm, looking forward to the year ahead. I'm so excited that we're going back to work, that certainly the word escapes me, but so many states now are supporting films and have budgets for that. So it's a very exciting time. And so I'm really, really looking forward to being on set, if you will. I also have a couple of films coming up through which which I've taken a role in myself as an actor. And so going back into performing a little bit, and we'll see how that goes.
Wow. Was that a journey for you, getting to that place where you could be back in front of the camera, or?
I guess one could say I've always been in the journey. It's going to be interesting to take on these roles, and yet I take them on from a Black woman's perspective, understanding our experience and the honor of being showcasing them. Yeah, so it's pretty exciting.
Wow. You mentioned your mom earlier and her entrepreneurial ventures, how she traveled and did hair wardrobe for many of the greats during her time. I'm curious, what was your takeaway during that period? What did you take from her that has helped you become who you are today?
I think certainly her affirming attitude and the way she poured into the women that she worked with. I remember her telling me a story that one time all of them had went to see Billie Holiday, and it was a dark moment for Billie. And Louis McKay said to my mother, could you, go back and do her hair and makeup? I don't want the folks to see her like this. And she did, and she poured into her. I remember her talking about little Esther Phillips not feeling beautiful. And I thought Esther Phillips was gorgeous. She had a gap that I thought was just amazing. But, in this country, that gaps weren't the standard of beauty. And my mother kept, just reminded her of how gorgeous and uniquely beautiful she was. And certainly Sass, her many incarnations of Sarah, on album covers and on stage. I remember one time I got to go to the Ed Sullivan show and to see, mommy backstage doing hair and makeup. And then the dancers, because variety shows had a lot of dancers then. And so I just thought beauty was the most glamorous, glorious thing ever. So to see the dancers all back there in their costumes and the backstage makeup, this was long before, one got to go backstage at a fashion show. You're at a variety show. And I remember the Jackie Gleason show. Those dancers were like Radio City Rockettes, if you will. And so it was just, the whole experience was amazing. And then I think too, with the everyday gals, in that my mother opened a beauty salon when she came home off the road. And just to watch those women come in there, I always love listening to grown folks' conversations. And so to listen to them under the hairdryer and the stories they would tell and how they built one another up, and how even though there wasn't makeup that matched us here on these shores, how they would say, well, if you mix a little of this with that and you mix that, and girl, this is how I got that powder to work right. And so I realized they were getting more than a great hairstyle. They were getting affirmation. They were getting fellowship. They were getting, their voices were being heard, and they were being seen at a time when Black women were the invisible women in the nation. So yeah, those are the takeaways. Of course, there's some really funny takeaways. Like every time my mother went on one of these long junkets with Sass, she would bring home the most amazing perfume and makeup and all of that from Europe. So every time she went out the door, and she'd be gone like anywhere from 6 weeks to 4 months, I would have a field day. Of course, I knew I was going to get in trouble when she came back home, but what the heck, it was amazing for a long time. So I think that, that's probably where my love of beauty and fashion developed. Just, the joys of being a woman, and, all of these toys, if you will, with which you get to express your beauty.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That had to be a very exciting time to experience. I recall you saying how at any given time, it might be Sammy Davis Jr., Ella Fitzgerald in the house. To have all those greats just right in your living room, as a little girl, I'm sure that had to be exciting.
To me, I knew they were, in my early age, I didn't really know the names, but I knew they were glamorous people. They had great style. They spoke differently. They smelled fabulous. And so, that was pretty exciting. My mother's pictures were very exciting. Her jaunts were exciting. I remember one time she came home and she had this big white monkey, like what you'd see in the circus. And it was a gift for me from Sammy Davis Jr. And he was so big, he had to have his own seat on the plane. And I was like, wow, well, when I think now, those were the days. Or when the furriers would come to the house and they would display all these furs and pelts. And I remember for my 8-year-old birthday, I think it was that she ordered a mink collar from my little cloth coat. And so, because I wanted a piece of the action, so to speak. So, yeah, it was fascinating. But I think the wonderland of it all for me wasn't in, like their names, but just how they carried themselves, how they showed up. Even the church ladies and my grandmother's friends, the sisters played cards every week, their tea parties, and they wore the white gloves and the little silk stockings that swished when they rocked and all of that. It was just a thing. And so I remember that I thought grown folks were so cool that when it was time for me to go to school, I was like, I don't want to go and be with any kids. The action is going on here in our house.
I know. Wow, certainly this is the era of the woman, and rightfully so. So many of them are stepping out into business and entrepreneurship. Certainly your mom did it, and you have done it and are continuing to. What are the steps that a woman should take to solidify herself as a businesswoman?
Well, I think it certainly, there's the introspective work that you have to do. You really have to understand what you bring to the table. What is that a divine assignment that you do it so well that you'd almost do it for free, if you will. And then who is the audience that it will bless? And how will you show up? Self-perception colors your entire life. So how do you see yourself? All of that has to be in place before you step out in business. And I think too, this whole competition thing, I remember speaking year before last to entrepreneurs in Botswana and just talking to them about, we can't see one another as competition. The only competition is between you and your greatness, or how far you can express it. The truth of the matter is, I don't think anyone can even pay you for your creativity. I've always said that. I think they can only pay you for your labor. So that means you have to have a distinctive view of self, and that what you've been given to do, no one else can do it like you. And so, yeah, that's really, really important that you know your value, and that you understand it so well that you wake up every day excited to be who you are and what you deliver. And then in cultivating that audience that's going to really become your supporters, your customers, if you will. What is the audience hungering for? What is it that you can provide that they never dreamed they wanted? Not what the rest of the market is doing. I think we have far too much Me Tooism. I think, when if I were God, I'd be scratching my head. It's like, oh, you're trying to be like so-and-so, but I gave you something that's distinctly yours. And did you get that? Did you see that? Yeah. And so, and to not be afraid of it, again, to be risk adverse is to be success adverse. So how far will you spend it? How far will you trust it? Do you understand who you are? And even not to be afraid of failure, because some of the greats that I know, one could say they failed their way to the top because they kept taking the test and they kept getting it right. They kept going back at it till they got it all the way. That's what a self-belief, that's how faith shows up in what you've been given to do. Yeah, you could be talented at many things, but that thing that you are meant to do, you're clear about it. And you may shy from it, you may fear it, but you can't deny it.
So true. So true. We hear sometimes women talk about the resistance that they get when it comes to leading or owning even certain sectors of society or business. I'm curious, have you experienced any of that resistance from males in the industry or in any sector that you have maybe tried to enter?
Well, for me, I had the joy of coming of age and working primarily with us, so before that, I experienced racism. That's what, reared its head. And my mother always, we were determined to defeat that. But, one of the things I will say, when I entered the industry, it didn't sit well with me that Black women, the women I knew well, how hard they worked to earn their income, that they couldn't find products that work for them in the beauty sector as easily as their white counterparts. And that didn't sit well with me. So that's where I had to push up against the suits. That's where I had to go out and fight for us. That's where for years I was the only Black woman in the room in the sea of beauty editors. And, pushing to help companies understand that, no, you do not have foundations for us. No, we're not coming to your counter because you don't see us. You don't even speak the right language to us. And I remember, after a while, I began to chair what was known at Essence as the Smart Beauty Breakfast. And we would invite the industry in, and one was held on language, one was held on marketing and advertising, do's and don'ts. And so we really went through beauty one-on-one in how to market to Black women, because they were just using all the wrong terms. For example, in the 90s, they were talking to us about wrinkling. Well, by the time a sister wrinkles, she's earned every one of those wrinkles at 90 years old. You better not talk to her about those lines in her face. You would get a slap. But just the things that were coming to us, but they missed it clear clipping. So that was the advocacy. That was, me as beauty activist, if you will, for a long time in getting products on the shelves that spoke to us.
It's so good, so good. And kudos to you for doing that, because it has opened the door for many of us to create our own products. So thank you for blazing that trail. Wow. I have to ask again, you mentioned it, it's a hot topic and a necessary one in our climate, and that is racism. And I want to get your commentary. I was asked a question by a Caucasian brother recently, and he was just asking, having an open discussion, and he said, do you think it is better, racism, now than it was 50 years ago? And I gave my answer to him, but I'm curious as to what you would say. Do you feel it is better now than it was maybe 50 years ago?
It's more sophisticated. It's more sophisticated. So you don't have Jim Crow, but what do you have? You don't have lynching anymore, but you have death by bullets in broad daylight. It's like saying, you've got some good tomatoes there. Never mind that they're rotten. At least you got some tomatoes. Really?
Wow. And that's not necessarily a good thing when you really sit and think about it.
Right.
You'd almost rather it be blatant, in your face.
Right.
You know what you're dealing with.
Right. Yeah. So if the elders,
wow.
Back in the day, if they were known as the help, if you will, and if they went home to the other side of the track, there was a clear understanding. But now it's more sophisticated. Now the person who sits next to you in your cubicle, or the person you report to, or as an entrepreneur, the person you have to do business with. Yeah. And so it's more sophisticated.
You're a woman of leadership, and I have to ask, we potentially, if God's willing, as the United States of America, could be looking at our first Black Madam Vice President, if God wills. How does that make you feel as a Black woman?
Oh, proud that I lived to see this time in our history. Just we've had the light on for this moment, if you will. I think that we are finally walking in the dreams of our ancestors, that this is not only a dream, this is a reality. This is really happening, that even as Madam Harris said, that Joe Biden had the audacity to select a Black woman as his vice presidential candidate. Yeah, I get goosebumps every time I say that. And so, for me, I have something now to show my children that my mother didn't have. My mother was involved in politics. We came of age in the city of Newark. My grandmother and my grandfather migrated here from the South. And so, when I look at these times, if I go back, thank God my father lived to see Barack Obama be elected. These are, and then on the other hand, I just have to interject and say, it's hard for me that we are still having first in 2020. Because this is the future, but we are having first. We're behind because we are still having first among us. Thankful, grateful to God, hard fought to get here, but we are still having first. And when you stop to think about what that means, you understand the ill winds that have come against us to even get these first here in 2020. I mean, if you grew up watching cartoons, for example, the Jetsons, and you think about the Jetsons flying all around in futuristic cars and so forth. This is 2020. What are we saying? What have we said? The whole birther con still being questioned. Still. How many times we got to pass the litmus test? Yeah.
Wow. your book, Editor in Chic, you make a wisdom principle or a point early on in the book, actually, and it states, life is a perfection of a point of view and a divine plan. I'm curious how to decipher between personal ambition and the divine plan.
Well, they are really inextricably bound, because again, that's about you discovering your purpose. Why am I here? I'm not here to just exist. I was created to do more than make money. I am more than the title that's on my business card. I am more than the name or the number on my paycheck. So they are inextricably bound. And I think that what COVID has allowed us to do is to redefine the new normal for ourselves. And that's one of the reasons why I always say that let's not say we'll be glad when we'll get back to normal. Normal was not what we had. Let's get to better, and we get to define that. So yes, life is the perfection of a point of view. What is your point of view? And a divine plan in action, because, I always say faith is nothing if it's not defining your life. So in the book of Jeremiah 29:11, the Bible says, for I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and bless you. So if you're not on that plan, what plan are you on?
That's good. That's good, Miss Mikki. It's very clear that you have a solid spiritual foundation. How does that it manifests in everyday the work that you do, but how do you maintain that while dealing with all the numerous things that you deal with work and everything else?
Well, because I don't allow myself to get distracted. Because life is not a dress rehearsal. And I say that early on in the book. This is it. I'm not getting to come back and try this any other way. So I got to tap dance while this music is playing. I can't wait until there'll be another song. And if I mess up this song, I could just get another song. No, this is it. So life is not a dress rehearsal. And so, again, I really do believe that faith is nothing if it's not defining your life. I don't think that we need to sit in service or virtual service and sing amen and holler another song if Monday through Saturday, there's a whole different journey. I don't think God needs that. He doesn't need entertaining. So, so if the good book is not your playbook, then that's like living a fractured life. The Bible says a double-minded person is unstable in all his ways. So if you got two playbooks, that's a problem. One playbook. That's what keeps it. And it's not always, I come up short. Don't get it twisted. Ain't no halos up here. It's a good flat iron and a brush on it. Get it day. It's not a halo. But yeah, I got one playbook. One.
That's so good. You're the leading voice in beauty, fashion, even Black culture for women. I'm curious, in your experience, how would you define beauty at its essence?
Oh, beauty is the truth of who you are. It's not in anything. It's not in any object. It's not anything that you can purchase. Beauty is the truth of who you are. The Creator said he made each of us in his image, and he's multidimensional. If you look around, like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So beauty is the truth of who you are. Yeah. And so even when I was talking to manufacturers, during the early days, I coined a slogan that said, beauty is our most emotional purchase, because I wanted them to understand that we weren't ever buying products. We were buying expressions. We were buying experiences we wanted to own and things that we wanted to know, but we weren't buying the beauty.
For that young lady who's journeying through her discovery of beauty, what tips would you give her?
Well, first of all, I would always say that don't compare yourself to others. The old expression, comparison is the thief of all joy. It really is. Don't compare yourself to others. You are a unique, unprecedented, divine original. Stay focused on that. Enjoy that experience. Understand the truth of who you are. When you look in the mirror, don't take it for granted. Behold yourself. Um, get engaged in self-care, because more than how you look, what are you about? Because that's part of how beauty manifests itself. It shows up ready. It's loving, it's giving, it's inspiring, it's fierce, it's fearless, it is leadership. It has so many dimensions to it. So, I think that part of the problem is our young women have to be careful not to allow social media to rob them of their truth, because everybody's banking on what they see on social media as having value. Now, you have to watch the content that you consume, because you could be basing your value on that which is counterfeit. Yeah. So you have to watch where you spend your dwell time. You have to understand the source. I go on social media like anybody else, but you have to understand the source. You have to understand what you're getting from it. Is it infotainment or is it entertainment? Is it making a withdrawal or is it making a deposit? Does it leave you feeling better or does it leave you feeling worse? Does it constantly make you feel like you got a void? Then it's time to change that tone. Time to change that destination, rather. That's not your style.
So good, Miss Mikki. I've got to ask, you're a woman of great wisdom. What has 2020 taught you thus far?
That you don't need half the things that you thought you needed. That's the first thing. That the simple pleasures at the end of the day are the best. That relationships are your wealth. That joy is something that resides within it. It doesn't depend on anything. And don't trade it in for happiness, because that is fleeting. But joy is something that can be constant if you don't get in the way. Yeah. So those are, yeah. And study much. The elders used to say that, study much. So I read, I'm if they ever lit a match to this house, it would be because of the books that it went up in flame, because I read every single thing. Yeah. Wow. I've got everywhere. Yeah.
Wow. Speaking of books, I can't help but to admire the covers of the storyboard that you have behind you.
Yes. This is my inspiration board, my board of fierce Black women and all our strengths and complexities and how we show up and see ourselves. So yeah, every shade, all hair textures, all, you name it. We're all here. Everybody from Michelle Obama to every model, Rihanna, Beyonce, you name it. The whole tribe is here. Yeah.
Wow. Editor-in-Chief, the new book, How to Be Styled and Your Most Empowered Self. Before we go, how can individuals get their hands on the book and connect with you?
So they can get their hands on the book at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, all your favorite sites. You can purchase the book there. And then you can follow yours truly and continue the conversation on my social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, at I Am Mikki Taylor.
Yes, definitely. Miss Mikki Taylor, any special big events underway with Essence?
Oh, well, 2021 is underworks, on the table. And I can't, share a thing, but I can tell you it's going to be big. It is going to be epic. I don't even want to say big. I'm going to say it's going to be epic. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I know many are sitting there hoping and wishing that the festival will be back on because they missed their opportunity. But I trust that you guys are working to bring that something special to the audience.
Indeed. This is our 50th anniversary. So, we got to make up for the party.
Absolutely. Well, Miss Mikki, I appreciate you joining me. Get the book, you guys, Editor-in-Chic, and also get the latest publication of Essence. And be sure to follow Miss Mikki Taylor and connect with her. She is definitely a leader in the beauty, fashion, and empowerment industry. Miss Mikki, I appreciate you so much. Stay well and stay safe.
Thank you. Likewise.
Well, there you have it, Miss Mikki Taylor, an amazing woman with so much wisdom, so much authority when she speaks. I mean, I could just talk to her all day long. Listen, be sure to check out her book, The Editor-in-Chic, a new Audible project she has, A Force of Beauty, and also continue to stay connected to the Essence magazine. If you're not already connected, be sure to get one and see what's going on in the world of fashion and beauty and culture. You know, it's such an amazing publication. Listen, I thank you as always for tuning in and joining me. Be sure to download, like, and subscribe to the podcast on Apple or anywhere you like to listen to your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and leave me a review to let me know what you're thinking and how you're connecting with the content. I'd love to hear from you. Listen, this is the Build on Beauty podcast, where beauty is born skin deep. I'm your host, Cornell Jermaine. Until next time, let your soul be made whole. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Build on Beauty podcast. For more information about our host, please visit cornelljermaine.com.